Oh, I didn't notice you there. As you can see, we got a deck. This is me, Evan, from Team Into One for Game. And a little bit back, we recorded Sword and Shield testing. And the deck I brought to the table was Beheeyem. And I wanted to do a deck profile on this because I had a lot of good ideas about the deck, and we did a lot of talking afterwards, and I made some revisions. So this list isn't the same as the one in the video. So this is basically a better version. My team and we talked about like what sort of revisions we could do, because after all, these testing videos, they are us testing decks. None of these decks are perfectly rounded out, but I wanted to do one of our first deck profiles on a deck that I've really enjoyed, which is Beheeyem. And I wanted this to be more of a reflection video. It's more kind of as I go. I can't think of the word. You just go on. This isn't scripted. I just wanted to have something about me rambling about this neat deck. And my overall reflections and thoughts going forward. Another reason I wanted to bring this deck up is because I haven't seen it like being posted anywhere. Like, no one is talking about Beheeyem. And I think that's kind of good and bad. If you wanted to bring a deck that no one was really thinking about, this deck might be like a really good pick for your local cups. I feel like Beheeyem before had like a lot of issues, and that's why no one was playing it before. And now it's just sort of turned into like a non-existent deck. Earlier, I had placed top 64 at Richmond, and I wanted to make a deck profile then, but it kind of just got pushed out of the way, and Expanded is gone before you know it. So I thought it would be better, especially since a lot of the cards and ideas that I had from Expanded got essentially translated into Standard. Usually when you have when you want to go to Expanded, you take a Standard deck and you bring it over, sort of like Pika-Rom. That's the biggest example that I think of when translating decks from one format to another. But in Sword and Shield, we got a lot of cards that I really think makes Beheeyem a viable deck. So obviously you have the star of the show, Beheeyem. The overall strategy, you're just going to be bouncing him back and forth and locking your opponent out. And then you're going to throw up some sort of blocker, which I'll mention later. But the card that really brings this deck out is the Cincino line. It literally has the same ability as Trade, and that was my main draw support that I brought in for Expanded was Zoroark GX, and that helped me thin out my deck and get things going. And part of the problem with Standard is that your only two options for accomplishing this were Pidgeotto and Nagan and LGX. But now with Cincino being able to discard and draw two, we finally have that good option. The problem with Naganadel is that you have to focus your whole deck around Ultra Beast when you want to be focusing around Beheeyem. So you have to add so much clutter to your deck to add a Pokemon that's meant to declutter your deck. And as with the next Pokemon, Zebstrika, I wasn't running this. It's a 2-2 Zebstrika line. I wasn't running this in the previous video with the Sword and Shield testing. It was a 2-2 Pidgeotto line. One problem in Expanded that I found was when you get to the end. Unlike most decks, this deck, you want to blitz through your deck, discard a bunch of trash, because you have to have 60 cards in your deck. You can't run any less. So we do have to run like a bunch of search cards and cards to get through the deck in order to get to the end where we would like to have a couple Algium on the bench. We also have a Ditto. Because we do run multiple evolutions. But we usually want like maybe 1 or 2 Beheeyem and then an energy to go back in the deck. But when you get to the end, a problem with Cinccino and Zoroark is you'll eventually run out of cards because if you get to the end of the deck, and let's say you have 4 cards in hand, and then the rest of your deck is the Beheeyem that you shuffled in. Yes, you'll be guaranteed to get the cards you need because you'll draw for turn, and then you'll need to trade in order to get the last few pieces. And in Expanded, you have Execute. So you can prop trade, and then you'll have all your combo pieces. But we don't have Execute in the standard format. So we need like another draw Pokemon. And for the overall deck, having the 2-2 other draw with the 3-3 Cinccino, I really enjoy having it around. But if you watch our other video, you notice that I never get out Pidgeotto because I never feel like I needed it. So Zebstrika will give you a stronger draw. And part of the thing you do want to do with the deck is trash things and draw. So as you want to attack with Beheeyem, you would like to have some blockers to go into. So for this deck, I decided to run 2 Gumi and 2 Marie. What's interesting is I went through a lot. There's like so many blockers that you can run, and interestingly, the original blockers that I was thinking about running was like Alolan Persian, which would stop tag teams, Ultra Beasts, and a Pokemon with special energy. ADP and Keldeo might have a Rainbow Energy or something, but they would stop ADP. Alolan Persian seems to be good, but now that Pokemon V are coming out, it's kind of useless. So that quickly got thrown away. The other Pokemon that you might be surprised that I'm not running is Alolan Ninetales, which blocks EXs and GXs. We don't have EXs in the format, so it would just be blocking GXs. But as I said before, now we're getting Pokemon V, and a lot of decks might be centered around Pokemon V, or they'll include at least one. I think like every type has a good Pokemon V that they can use. So, like, they're always going to have a way around it. And as you saw in our video, Megan's Reshizek had Cramorant V And fire decks also get Torkoal V. ADP might be running that Zacian. Zach was also running Sableye, more Pico. Rob was running Lapras. And Nick had Tapu Koko V. So all of the decks in our previous videos had answers to Alolan Ninetales. So those are some of the reasons I don't run those cards. And the Pokemon I like the most is Gumi. All of the decks above Sableye, it makes all the Pokemon's attacks cost 1 more. So you would like to swing into Beheeyem and then bring up a blocker. In terms of the Sableye Obstagoon, it makes it energy attachments are like so difficult for them, and you notice that, and you might notice that in that video. So Gumi would hurt them a lot. Water Box, Gumi would do absolutely nothing in. More Pico, Sticky Membrane hurts, as they have to constantly discard cards, energies from themselves per their attack, and they already cost 3 energy. Torkoal and Reshek, even though Meg was running Welder, Sticky Membrane still does some work against them, and if they miss a beat in a Welder, it can cost them the game. So Gumi is like integral to the strategy. And as it has 1 retreat cost, same thing as Mareep. All these Pokemon have 1 retreat cost, so it's easy to get them out of the active in order to swing again. Our other main blocker, as you can say, is Mareep with the Fluffy Pillow ability. This boy puts your opponent's guys to sleep. And as we'll see later, we have cards that will make sleep stronger. And the big thing with Mareep is you might be like, oh, well, everyone's wanting Switch nowadays. Exactly. That's why Beheeyem becomes so much stronger leading into the new format. And we now have the turn 1 no supporter rule. So, in addition to not being able to play supporters earlier, people are going to focus their decks way more on items. And Beheeyem locks items. So you kind of see where the overall disruption is. But I'll get more into the strategy towards the end. But for right now, I kind of just want to lay out more draw options. In the video, I had a different draw supporter line, but now I've just completely straightened it out with 4 Professor Magnolia, or Professor's Research, however that you want to pronounce that, and 4 Cynthia. I just want raw draw. No Lilies. Lilies is pretty garbage. No other draw supporters really help this deck that much. In terms of supporters, I don't think you have many options. The other draw supporter that I ran was Guzman Hala, and I don't think I used that a single time. It seems good in theory, being able to get your tools, your stadiums, and your triple acceleration energy, but I would every single time rather just dump my hand with a Magnolia. So similar to Expanded, where you had Professor Sycamore, I would draw like heavy Professor Sycamores to just trash the hand real fast and draw with Zoroark, and that would allow me to go through my decks. In terms of searching for items, we got 4 Quick Ball, 4 Mysterious Treasure, and 4 Evolution Incense. This just allows you to search literally anything in the deck. Quick Ball gets you basics, I'm pretty sure. You discard one. All these have the cost of discarding one, which is perfect for this deck. This deck doesn't care at all about discarding. Treasure gets you your Elgiums and Beheems, and it also gets you your Goomies. Quick Balls, you want to get your Minchinos first and maybe a Blitzel. The first thing I usually go for, getting out Ditto and an Elgium, because Ditto can become Zebstrika or Cincino. So if you have like a draw supporter and the ball, the Quick Ball or the Treasure, I'd usually try to go for Ditto and an Elgium. And then Evolution Instants can get used to Zebstrikas and Cincinos and Beheems. One more blocking Pokemon. That's not really a Pokemon, but Lily's Pokédoll. Lily's Pokédoll is very interesting in this format because, as you can see with our other decks, we utilized Lily Pokédoll in so many ways. With the Sableye Obstagoon deck, the Water Box, where you didn't really think you would see it, but it bought them a lot of turns. You would think that it would only be in the Morpeko Dolls deck, as that deck has been doing alright in Japan, and that's kind of the main strategy. But a unique interaction with Lily's Pokédoll in this deck is the effect of, at any time during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active, you can discard all cards from it and put it in the bottom of your deck. So, one interesting interaction that I found with this effect is, let's say your Pokemon gets knocked out. I'm going to bring up Mareep. I'm going to put you to sleep. I'm going to retreat into Beheeyem. I'm going to swing with Beheeyem, put it back in the deck, and then I'm going to bring up Lily's Pokédoll. So if you happen to fall asleep and not wake up, then all I have to do is put Lily's Pokédoll back on the bottom of the deck, and then I can bring up Goomy or Mareep or whatever you want to use, and essentially just retreat and Mysterious Noise again, because Lily's Pokédoll, the effect does not count as retreating. So it essentially gives you the ability to double retreat, which we found really interesting in the deck. The card I cut for Guzma and Hala, 2 Pokemon Catcher. I had no way to gust up Pokemon in the last video, and immediately after the match, Rob really wanted me to put some gusting effect in, and I told him no originally, because this was us talking immediately after the video, for context. And I said no because Custom Catcher, you need to run 4 of them, and with this deck, you're never ever gonna get 2 in your hand when you need it. So that option's immediately out the window. Great Catcher, maybe, but the discarding 2, like, we want to discard the Evolution Instance, the Treasure, the Quick Ball, and our supporters are our main cards that we want to trash, and maybe other Pokemon that we don't need. But you'll quickly run out of cards, and you won't have cards to be able to trade with. And as we go further into our Sword and Shield format, you can't Great Catcher up Pokemon V. So we noticed when we were watching Japanese tournament videos and looking at other Japanese lists, for gusting effects, we noticed they ran Pokemon Catcher. And Rob's like, he mentioned to me, he's like, well, I guess you could run Pokemon Cat, because we were talking about cards that are coming back, being Pokemon Catcher and Energy Retrieval. And you might not know it, but those cards are getting reprinted. So I figured we could give Pokemon Catcher a try, being an insta-playable. And it does suck that you gotta flip a coin, and it might not work out. I'll admit, it might not work out for you. But it's an instant playable, and it gives you a gusting option. Like, at least you have a chance to gust. Rather than not being able to play the card at all with Great Catcher, or being unable to get 2 custom Catcher at a time. So now for our tools, we got 2 U-turn board. You only need 1, but if you prize a U-turn board, then you have no way of getting it out. So 2 worked wonders for me. And you usually want to throw them on Gumi Mareep. But if necessary, you can throw them on Zebstrika or Cincino. Fun fact about U-turn board. The biggest thing about it is the bottom text, which reads, if this card is discarded from play, put it in your hand instead of the discard. So if you notice, I pull off some cool tricks with the U-turn board, and this sort of goes into bigger brain plays, so some common scenarios that I ran into is if you start Minccino or Blitzel, then you can just slap the U-turn board and retreat. And if something like happens, or like if they get knocked out or something, you get the board back. But one thing that I figured out and expanded that I brought over from Standard is, if you have U-turn board in hand and you don't have Gumi Mareep, you don't have a good Pokemon that you want to put U-turn board to, don't put it on Zebstrika or Cincino. Put it on Elgyem, because if you attack with Mysterious Noise, it reads, shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it. So not only do you get to put the energy back, but you also put the U-turn board back after you Magnolia, so then you can get it back when you're ready to put it on Gumi or Mareep. Don't waste it. You can always recycle it. The second key interaction is with Lily's Pokédoll. You can also throw U-turn board on Lily's Pokédoll, put it on the bottom. You can use your Magnolia, then activate Lily's Pokédoll, and get back the U-turn board. So you essentially bounce it back into your hand, which maybe some newer players or people who haven't used U-turn board might learn from this video. Like, a cool trick you can gain from this video is unique interactions with Lily's Pokédoll and U-turn board. For our recovery, I want to run 2 Great Rod. 2 might be too much, but as you notice, we're constantly discarding things, and we're only running 2 Gumi, and if you have to get rid of Pokemon early, because you can always discard them with our Quick Balls, Treasures, and Evolution Incense, Sprint. I like to call it Thrifty. That's what I thought the original translation was. It's make do in English, but I'll refer to it as Thrifty when I play and in general. Sprint, we're going to be losing Pokemon. And don't be afraid to discard like a Beheeyem line. You only need 2 on the field at once in case they get gusted somehow. Like, if your opponent is running 9-tails, that's a reason you need to run 2 LGM on the bench. But if you know all your opponent has is something like Custom Catcher, then you can just lock them out with Mysterious Noise and rely on 1 LGM. And then you can use more bench space to keep a Mareep or a Cincino and Zebstrika to ensure that you get the next one. So now for stadiums, I'm running 4 Slumbering Forest, which makes it so much harder to get out of sleep. The chances of your opponent hitting 2 heads for sleep is kind of rough. And especially with item lock, it's going to be very difficult for them to get out of the active to be able to swing into something. And I'm running 4 right now, but if you wanted to cut one, I could see it. The main philosophy with going with 4 was that I wanted to run my opponents out of stadiums. Because one thing they could do is like save their stadiums, maybe like Heat Factory or Giant Hearth, like in the video with Meg, or maybe they're running Chaotic Swell, and I'll need to bump out the Chaotic Swells in order to put my own Slumbering Forest. That might not work out. That like original idea might not work out as good as I think it will, because we are still testing, and I could see you cutting a Slumbering Forest. 3 might be the best option, but for right now, I wanted to run 4. And I'll talk more about cuts soon, because all we've got left is 4 triple acceleration energy. You're just going to be attacking with Mysterious Noise. That's it. So now for more, I guess, deck building suggestions and philosophies that I had going into this. Like I said, this list was built off my expanded list, where you got I literally had 3/3 Zorarks, and that worked out for me in expanded. So I figured I would just bring it over to standard. Same as expanded 4/3 Beheems. You don't need the 4th Beheem. You run 3. If one's prized, then you've still got 2 to work with. And since it bounces itself back, and we've got 2 of the new fishing rod, 2 should be plenty enough. 2/2 Zebstrika. Like I said, you could run Pidgeotto, or you can be more aggressive with Zebstrika. You can really put whatever here. One consideration that I had is maybe you could cut 1/1 Zebstrika, because I never really felt the need for Pidgeotto. And, of course, with 1/1, that's playing it more risky. But you still have your 3/3 Cincino. Apologies. I just got, if you can tell, I'm a little bit nasally and stuffy. I just got done getting over a cold, so if I cough, that's the reason why. So this definitely won't be perfect, but that was pretty, I would stick with 2/2 for now. Like I said, you just gotta test it, because these are new decks. One concern is catcher never pulling off or never working. So potentially I could see you maybe dropping a Slumbering Forest for the 3rd catcher, so that you're more likely to hit it when you need it. You could drop 1/1 Zebstrika or Blitzel for the 2 catcher, just giving you more chances to hit the catcher when you need it. But if you want to talk more about blockers, we got the Polka Doll, the Gumi Mareep. Maybe one more option you could consider that I ran and expanded was Haunch Crow GX, shutting off your opponent's tool, special energy, and stadiums. The tools aren't really mattering as much in standard now. Special energy I don't see being like a big thing. I mean, maybe in like a Mewtwo list, but not really gonna happen. But the big thing with Haunch Crow is if you were going to do it, I would cut 1/1 Zebstrika, and you'd have to somehow add an air balloon, which reduces the retreat cost by 2. And Haunch Crow obviously has, I think, 2 retreats, so you'd need that. You can't just use a U-turn board, sadly. But if it did have 1 retreat, then all you'd have to do is a cut 1/1 Zebstrika, and then you'd be able to lock in your Slumbering Forest. I didn't really see any other stadiums that really appealed to me that much, so I just went heavy with Slumbering Forest. Maybe in your ideal world, if you're a fan of Haunch Crow, drop a Slumbering, and then you drop 1/1 Zebstrika. That's sort of more techy, and I'm not really. For this, I'm not a huge fan of going for more text than what we already have. If you notice, like a trend, it's like a two of rule. Mainly because we don't have any way of getting stuff from the prizes. Like you got 2 catcher, 2 U-turn, 2 rods, 2 Gumi, 2 Mareep, 2 Blitzel, and Zebstrika. I sort of have that pattern going on with deck building is the multiples. Other than that, I wanted to keep it rather straightforward. And expanded, you really do have more options. Another option would be Pyroar and expanded, but that's not a thing in standard, so you're pretty much just going to have to stick with Gumi and Mareep. Like I said, you could run a Alolan Ninetales, a Alolan Persian, and Haunch Crow, but maybe if you see it for your local meta, I just don't see it working out too well for you, because there's not a lot of options to drop. You really need your 4/4 supporter line. You need to be hitting them every turn. You cannot afford to miss a Mysterious Noise. If you miss Mysterious Noise, you really have to consider your board state and whether you should scoop or not. And this deck is focused on hitting it every single turn. In terms of gameplay, I always choose to go first. If you have the choice, obviously you don't have a choice if you win the game in a best 2 out of 3 or you lose the dice roll. So you might not have the option to go first, but if you can, I would always choose to go first, as this is a setup deck and we have plenty of items. You're not going to get donked. Like, we have plenty of Pokemon, and we've got Clefairy Doll, so you essentially have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 18 possibilities. So almost a third of the deck, on top of having Quick Ball and Mysterious Treasure. Like, it's going to be 1 in a million odds if you get donked. I'll talk about going first maybe later in another video. But generally, you're just going to want to set up your Cincinnos first. Maybe Zebstrika. But if you refer back to the video, you'll see me going for draw, One common thing you might fall into that I would try to avoid is getting greedy on the Beheeyem. Listen, set up your board first. Set up your Cincinnos and your Substrika first before you go for a bad mysterious noise. I think in game 2 or 3, I ought to just sit and pass rather than go for the mysterious noise. In the beginning, it might seem a little more difficult of when to mysterious noise. Sometimes it's better not to mysterious noise. Sometimes it's better if your board isn't ready and your deck is still kind of large. Because if you hit the mysterious noise, you might put yourself in a vulnerable situation. And cause once you start the chain, you want to keep going. So it's better to pass than to miss it later in the game. Because later down the road, you can't afford to pass. But in the early game, yeah, especially with the Lily's Polkadot and that we're a single prizer deck, you've got a little bit of time. But once you've thinned out your deck and you've got your draw Pokemon, you should be good to go just to cycle Mysterious Noises all over again. I guess since it's a straightforward deck, like just 4, 4, 4, 4, 2, 2, 2s of everything, it seems like it might seem easy to play, but there's some decisions and key interactions with like knowing about the Pokédoll and the U-turn board that you might mess up with this deck. And part of the thing with this deck is it might be on the higher end of skill intensity, even though you're only using one attack over and over again. There is still decisions to be made. And if you refer back to our video again, there are key points where I make some big decisions, and messing up those decisions can lose you the lock and end up losing you the game. In terms of looking towards the future of this being like a good meta call, so this is looking more advanced and local metas and metas in general. I really like this as a pick. For a challenge, yeah, definitely go for it. Especially if you never played it before. You might fall in love with the deck. I definitely have. And you don't really lose much at a challenge. In terms of a local meta, you'd really have to call it. But I could see this deck like easily taking a challenge. In a cup setting, definitely winning a cup. Since this is more of like a setup deck with Cincinnas and Substrikas, if you never played Zoroark at a cup, you might have a little issues. But now that Professor Magnolia's in Standard, I think you have enough consistency to win a cup in a best of one setting. If you make it to top cut, you'll probably win the whole tournament. In terms of a regionals going in, I don't know if I could recommend a beginner. I definitely couldn't recommend a new player to run this deck. Because going into Richmond, even though I have a good deal of stamina, towards the end, I barely missed. I think I went like 5-2-2 or something like that, or 5. All right, no, I went 6-3. Yeah, that was my final record. And towards the end, and looking at like the day 2, I was kind of thinking like, I'm kind of glad I could just skirt out with. I made 45th, like 6-3. I was like one tie away from making day 2. But by the end, I was pretty exhausted with this deck. And you might find yourself getting exhausted with this deck. So that's a little bit of a warning. But it's not like as big brain or thinking like Pidgeotto. It's more so maintaining Beheems. That's the skill in the deck, is setting up your proper board state, thinning properly, and maintaining Beheems. Even though you're using the same attack over and over again, if you, like I said, if you miss a mysterious noise, you need to consider should you scoop or not. You really got to consider that. In terms of how well this deck could do, I could see someone picking up this deck. Maybe more and more experienced players, or maybe a pro could easily day 2 with this. Maybe a top 8, but I could definitely see this getting an easy top 32. As for specific meta predictions with this deck and matchups, it seems to trade well against all the EX, GX, V Pokemon. I think out of our training videos, I think the deck that I would have the hardest time with maybe the Sableye Obstagoon, because Obstagoon can snipe. Maybe decks that can get around Pokédoll, that can be a little frustrating. But in terms of that matchup, you have Goomy, which really hurts them a lot. Water Box, Goomy does nothing for you, and you'd rather utilize Fluffy Pillow to keep them asleep. Morpeko, it might be rough for them because you want a mysterious noise and then lock them out of their dolls. They won't be able to gust, but Goomy makes them 4 energy attack, so that matchup looks good for you. Torkoal V, I'm not sure how far Torkoal will go. I think it's an interesting deck, especially with Magcargo, but I don't see it really beating Beheeyem. ADP, Zacian, they can pop off turn 1, and they've definitely got the Altered Creation. You can't do anything about Altered Creation. So all your single prizers turn into double prizers, and things could quickly turn bad for you. And if they're running Lucario Melmetal in a bulkier build, Beheeyem hits for resistance. No, they don't anymore. Not anymore. Unless they're using Lucario Melmetal, the only thing you got to worry about is early the frying pan early. But once you get the lock going, then they can't put the frying pan on. So they might only get 1 down early, but after that you should be good. A lot of healing, like Mallow and Lana, that can kind of put you out of the game, so you gotta watch out for that. Mainly tanky builds and things that can heal a lot are gonna hurt you. But the deck seems really good all around, and you've got some options like adding more catcher, cutting down on the Slumbering Forest. But I feel really confident in this build. I don't know. I'm still unsure about over here with the Zebstricas. You really got to test that for yourself. It might be a preference thing. I don't know if I can go back to Pidgeotto. It's really tough, but it's more so you'd have to see for yourself. This definitely isn't a perfect 60. I would say it's like a perfect 56. That's the best way I could describe it, as a perfect 56. I mean, your draw supports, like Cincino's searching and supporters aren't going to change much. U-turn board is pretty solid. I'm just trying to think of what options you guys could try out. Because, like I said, this isn't the perfect list and we're still testing. But I don't really know much what else to say. This is a really solid pick. I'll definitely be running it for at least a cup. I might try some other decks, but in terms of picks, this is one of my favorite picks. It might not be the best deck in the format. Like, you could argue that it's not the best deck in the format, but it's definitely got some strong pros. It's got consistency. It's got the dolls. It's got Goomy. It's got Sleep. It's got so many options, and it's definitely a strong contender. And I just have fun with the deck. That's one of the biggest things about this, is that I really enjoy the deck and I have fun with it. You may too. Maybe mysterious noising over and over again might not be fun for some. It's definitely not a fun for your opponent, having to deal with all this annoying things. But definitely give it a try. There's really not much else to say. As it seems, it's like a simple. The best way to describe it is a simple but complex deck. But definitely give it a try for a cup coming up. But yeah, I guess that just about does it. Leave a comment like saying like, do you like Beheeyem? Hey, do you like Beheeyem? Do you have any suggestions for the deck? I am definitely taking suggestions. If you have like some ideas for this deck, definitely post them out there. If you have any questions about the deck, I can definitely answer. Leave a comment. We got Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I think that's all we've got so far. So we definitely have a bunch of outlets you can talk to us if you have any questions or anything, or you want to check out any other videos. If you haven't checked out the Beheeyem versus Rush deck video, I don't know what you're doing here. You really need to check out that video first to see how the deck runs. That's also why we're not playing any PTCGO matches. Well, obviously because the cards aren't out yet, but we already have matches that you can go check out. If you're interested in more Sword and Shield content, we have plenty coming up and already out. But other than that, I think we're just going to head on out. Ariados. Goodbye.